The gleaming boardroom at Marlowe Pacific's San Francisco headquarters hummed with tension. Senior executives adjusted their silk ties, flipping through briefing packets about a surprise merger offer from Cresswell and Hart. My older sister, Vanessa Marlowe, now CFO, sat confidently at the end of the sleek glass table, already basking in the glow of a victory she assumed was hers. I moved silently near the catering cart, lining up porcelain cups and imported creamers just as I had every morning for the past 2 years. My tailored navy shift dress and clean ponytail kept me inconspicuous, just the administrative assistant, an afterthought to the corporate elite. "Alyssa," Vanessa called, not glancing up from her tablet. "Make sure it's the Ethiopian roast this time. Cresswell's team has taste. Don't serve them the junk we had last week." If only she knew that the junk had been my own doing, an experiment in observation. How people treated the invisible ones always told the real story. "Of course, Miss Marlowe," I said calmly, preparing the premium roast I'd sourced myself from my own private label cafe chain. The boardroom filled quickly. Dad, technically retired but still executive chair, took his seat at the head of the table, nodding at Vanessa with pride. The prodigal daughter turned finance queen. The one who'd stayed loyal when I'd left at 26 to build something of my own. "Everyone ready?" he asked, folding his hands. Cresswell and Hart plays hardball. Their CEO is known for ruthless negotiation. I nearly laughed. They had no idea just how ruthless I'd become. "We're ready," Vanessa said confidently. "They're desperate to merge. We'll push our terms hard. Don't worry, Dad." The numbers she held? All manipulated. Cresswell's real financials had been scrubbed, restructured, and reframed by me. "Alyssa," Vanessa barked, snapping her fingers. "Coffee? And try not to make a mess like last time." Last time had been 2 years ago. My first day, trembling from nerves as I quietly re-entered the empire that had once dismissed me. No one had recognized the youngest Marlowe daughter. Today they were about to find out who truly controlled this deal. Because the CEO of Cresswell and Hart, walking in just moments later, would greet me not as an assistant, but as the owner who orchestrated every move. The glass doors slid open, and in walked Julian Blackwell, lead counsel for Cresswell and Hart. I had personally selected him for this moment. His reputation was legendary, relentless, razor-sharp, and never one to bluff. "Good morning," Julian said coolly, his voice echoing slightly off the chrome and glass walls. He gave a courteous nod before continuing. "Before we begin, I'll be handing out a series of documents. These are for executive eyes only." A heavy silence fell as he distributed thick black folders stamped with "Confidential Strategic Acquisition Review." The air shifted. No one spoke. "We're on a tight timeline," Vanessa snapped. "Where's your CEO? We were told they'd be present today." Julian raised an eyebrow, then smiled faintly. "They are." He turned slightly toward the back of the room. "In fact, they've been here the entire time." And just like that, the moment arrived. I stepped forward from behind the catering station and removed the minimalist glasses I'd worn as part of my low-profile disguise. My posture straightened. My voice, once soft and forgettable, rang out clearly. "The Ethiopian roast is ready. Though I doubt anyone will care about coffee in about 30 seconds. My father's head jerked up. Vanessa's smirk faded. "Alyssa?" Dad said, eyes narrowing in stunned confusion. What are you doing? We need to start the—" "Open the folders," I interrupted gently, resting one hand on the conference table. "Page 1 should be illuminating." Papers rustled, faces paled. Vanessa's hand froze mid-turn. No. "This isn't accurate," she muttered, scanning the sheets again. "This is real," I finished for her. "Cresswell and Hart. Privately held, majority-owned and controlled by Alyssa Marlowe." I gave them a calm, practiced smile. "Or, as the business world knows me, A.J. Marlowe, CEO." Dad's lips parted, but no sound came. He stared at the page like it had personally betrayed him. "You've been here all this time, a secretary." "Administrative assistant," I corrected, sliding into the chair at the head of the table, his old seat. Yes. Watching, learning, noticing which people do the work and which ones just take the credit. You ghosted after college, Vanessa said, her voice rising. Moved to the Rockies or something to find yourself? I did, I said calmly, and while you were soaking up praise for doubling profits on paper, I was building one of the most aggressive equity firms in the Western U.S. I placed another folder on the table. Now let's talk about what your actual books say. Or have you just been shifting numbers around and praying no one would trace the shell companies you created? I asked, my voice calm, surgical. Vanessa's face went from crimson to ghost white. That's right, sister dear, I know about all of them. The fake subsidiaries, the layered debt vehicles, the creative accounting that made her look like a finance prodigy. Dad, she turned to our father, eyes wide with betrayal. You can't let her do this. She abandoned the company, abandoned us. But he didn't say a word. He just stared at the files in front of him, eyes scanning the pages, expression hollow. The truth was settling in. Julian, ever composed, spoke up. Ms. Marlowe, legally, A.J. Marlowe has every right to be here. Cresswell and Hart now holds 51% of Marlowe Pacific's outstanding shares, acquired discreetly over the last 14 months. I reached for the nearest coffee cup I'd prepared, Brazilian roast, perfectly brewed, and took a measured sip. Much smoother than the bargain bin blend you mocked me for serving last quarter, don't you think, Vanessa? The room descended into chaos. Board members rifled through the acquisition documents with growing alarm. Several looked up with pale faces, others were already on their phones, texting or dialing. Vanessa's hands trembled as she scrolled through her own phone, no doubt trying to reach her legal team. The shares, Dad finally muttered, hoarse. How did we not notice? I let out a breath of soft laughter. When was the last time any of you even checked the shareholder registry? You were too busy patting yourselves on the back to see who was actually buying your legacy out from under you. Julian opened another briefcase and began distributing a fresh set of documents. These outline Marlowe Pacific's actual financial status, complete with buried liabilities and concealed debt vehicles. Vanessa lunged across the table, reaching for the documents. Those are confidential. Nothing is confidential from the majority shareholder, I said coldly, including the offshore accounts you've been using to cover up your quarterly losses. The murmurs among the board turned urgent. Several were already calling their lawyers. The pension fund? Dad turned to Vanessa, his voice almost pleading. You said those investments were secure. She cried. But her voice cracked. I was protecting the company. By gambling with retirement funds? I stood, letting the weight of my authority fill the room. By using ghost entities to conceal that Marlowe Pacific is already, by most definitions, insolvent. Insolvent? One of the board members echoed in disbelief. I nodded. Those glowing quarterly reports? Fiction, crafted by someone who knew how to lie, just not well enough. If you enjoyed watching Alyssa reclaim everything they thought she lost, don't forget to subscribe. The next part of her story is just getting started. Creative fiction, I said calmly, brought to you by Vanessa's so-called financial genius. I gave Julian a subtle nod. He tapped a key on his tablet, and the conference room's main screen lit up with a detailed financial dashboard. The graphs spoke volumes. A very different narrative than the one Vanessa had spun to the board. As you can see, I continued, gesturing toward the first slide, Marlowe Pacific's actual debt load is nearly triple what's been reported. And those flashy acquisitions Vanessa loves to mention? All debt financed and buried under a web of shell entities? You had no right to access this data, she snapped, her voice cracking. I had every right, I said evenly, while you were asking me to smile more and fetch your oat milk latte. I was quietly auditing every line of this company's operations. I looked around the room. It's amazing what people reveal when they think you're just the assistant who doesn't matter. Dad looked 20 years older than he had an hour ago, hands trembling against the pages. Why, Alyssa? Why go through all this effort? I met his eyes. Remember when I proposed that restructuring plan? 7 years ago? Before I left? He nodded slowly. You both laughed me out of this room, I said, my voice steady. Told me I didn't understand business. Said my ideas were naive. Vanessa scoffed. That plan would have tanked the company. Would it? I countered. Because I took that same plan and built Cresswell and Hart into a firm 10 times the size of Marlowe Pacific. While you were playing Empire with Dad's legacy, I was creating real value. My phone buzzed, a secure message from my executive team. Tech investigators are ready to proceed, just say the word. Of course, I said aloud, the pension scandal is just the tip of the iceberg. I turned to Vanessa. The SEC is very interested in your offshore accounts, falsified earnings reports, and, yes, insider trading. She went pale. I cut her off. The Davidson merger last spring. You bought through a proxy account 2 days before the press release. Board members physically moved their chairs away from her. Dad, please, she whispered, desperate. She's tearing everything apart. No, I said. I'm here to salvage what can be saved. Julian stood and passed out new packets. Effective immediately, Vanessa Marlowe is removed as CFO and suspended from all executive duties pending investigation. You can't fire me, she shouted, leaping to her feet so fast her chair hit the ground. I'm a Marlowe, Vanessa hissed. This is my company. Not anymore, I said, calmly placing my coffee cup on the polished glass table. I stayed seated, poised, collected. Cresswell and Hart now holds controlling interest in Marlowe Pacific, and unlike you, I know how to actually run a company. Dad finally found his voice. It came out hoarse and uncertain. The Marlowe name, our reputation, will survive, I assured him, once we clean up Vanessa's damage and implement proper governance across all departments. Then I added, more pointedly, and frankly, it might help if you finally retired for real, instead of rubber stamping every reckless thing she pushed through. The room was silent, tense. The only sound was the faint rustle of paper as board members kept flipping through the reports that outlined Vanessa's manipulations in stark detail. Own one thing, I said, lifting my cup once more. From now on, everyone drinks the same coffee, premium roast. I looked around the table. Because in every company I lead, we treat all employees with the same respect. From the boardroom to the break room, the fallout spread like wildfire through the financial world. By midday, Marlowe Pacific's stock had been temporarily suspended from trading as the market scrambled to process the truth behind the sudden power shift. News vans and financial journalists packed the building lobby, buzzing over headlines about the utter who turned out to be the hidden force behind Cresswell and Hart. I sat alone in my new office, Vanessa's old corner suite, skimming the latest forensic reports. They were worse than I'd expected. Ms. Marlowe, Julian said, entering with another stack of documents. The SEC is ready to move forward. Charges are being drafted. They're especially focused on the pension fund. Of course they are, I murmured, eyes narrowing. I thought of the hundreds of employees whose futures had been put at risk. Make sure they get everything they need. My phone buzzed again and again. Suddenly, I had family. Mom, call us, sweetheart. We need to understand. Aunt Patricia, brilliant girl, always knew you had it in you. Cousins I hadn't heard from in a decade, all trying to rekindle ties. I ignored them all. I had a company to rescue. A soft knock interrupted my thoughts. I looked up. Dad stood in the doorway, smaller than I remembered. His voice was quiet. The security guard made me get a visitor's pass to enter my own company. Not your company anymore, I said gently. Though you stopped running it long before today. You just didn't notice. He sank slowly into the chair across from me, shoulders heavy with regret. I trusted her, Dad said softly. She was always so confident, so sure of herself. No, I interrupted. You favored her. There's a difference. My voice remained even, though the weight of years pressed beneath it. You favored Vanessa when she ran 3 departments into the ground and you covered it up. When she crashed the European expansion and you blamed the market. I met his eyes. You favored her when she rolled her eyes at every female executive in the room and said women just don't understand real business. He was silent, then he asked quietly, "And you? Did all this, building your empire, make you happy? Did it prove us wrong?" I looked down at the open report in my hands, then closed the folder. "This was never about proving you wrong, Dad. Could you try it again?" I took a breath. "It was about proving myself right. Every time you dismissed my ideas, every time Vanessa mocked my lack of experience, I was building something real, something sustainable, something you never gave me the chance to do here." He gave a defeated nod. "They're calling you a corporate raider in the press." "The press doesn't understand," I replied. "I don't raid companies, I rescue them. I turn them into what they were always capable of becoming." A commotion outside drew both our attention. Through the glass walls, we saw security escorting Vanessa from the building, her designer coat bunched under one arm, a cardboard box of belongings clutched in the other. Her heels clicked loudly down the marble hallway. "She'll face charges," I said. "The pension fraud alone carries a prison sentence." Dad's face twisted with pain. "My daughter. Prison. Actions have consequences," I said firmly. "Something you never taught her." My phone buzzed. Another update. Client funds misused, vendor kickbacks, a long trail of deceit. Years of it. Dad stared at the floor. "I used to wonder why you stayed, after we shut down your restructuring plan. Why you worked your way up from the admin pool." I nodded. "Because I needed to understand every layer of this company. While Vanessa wore the title, I was learning how things actually worked." There was a knock. My real executive team, Harvard MBAs and trusted partners, stood waiting. "It's time for the transition meeting," I told Dad gently. "You should go home. Let us take it from here." He stood slowly, adjusting his tie. "The family dinners." "We'll see," I said, "if we ever learn to sit at the same table. Will you still?" "No," I said firmly. "That ended when you and Vanessa laughed me out of the boardroom 7 years ago. But maybe, once you've learned humility, we can begin again as equals." In weeks, Marlowe Pacific transformed. Vanessa's loyalists were replaced, debts exposed and resolved using Cresswell's capital, the pension fund restored with interest. Headlines erupted. Secretary turned CEO, sister saves Marlowe Pacific, corporate world's greatest undercover boss. But they missed the point. This wasn't about revenge. It was about rebuilding. Company, family, legacy. Vanessa pled guilty. Dad finally retired. His note read, "Will you let us listen now?" I smiled. Maybe. I never set out to expose my own family. I just wanted to be heard, to build something real, and to be treated with the same respect I gave to everyone around me. If you've made it this far in my story, thank you. Your support means more than you know. I'd love to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever been underestimated, overlooked, or told to stay in your place? Drop a comment below. Let's start a conversation, not just about business, but about what it means to fight for your worth without losing your integrity. If my journey resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button. Share this with someone who needs to be reminded that silence does not mean weakness, and that sometimes the quietest one in the room is already leading. And here's something I've learned. Don't wait for permission to be powerful. Observe, learn, build, stay kind, but stay sharp. Whether you're running a business or just trying to rebuild yourself, know this. Your story isn't over. It's just getting started. Let's grow together.